That's crazy.
Here it is. That's it right there. I just read from you for you from the History of Al-Tabari. That's volume 6. You'll find it in there, starting at page. Let's see. It starts at page 107.
So if they try to give me the Muslim shuffle, these Muslims are like, "Oh, this is not authentic." You know what I mean? What is this like?
Yeah.
what do you say back to them when they say this to you, right hand?
Get an education.
Well, they're definitely going to try to do that. So what they'll try to do is they'll go into, Synod, 50 different narrations that there is record of, for instance, from the other book I have. They're going to try to break down each and every one and discredit them. But unfortunately, they're not going to be able to if you actually go over it with them. You know what they do. Oh, we don't take that one,
Yeah,
even though it's Sahih, because one of the people in the chain, we don't really like him, or he ate ketchup on his hot dogs, so we don't take that. So
yeah, but they
whatever
can't
it
do that
is,
either way as Muslims, though. They have to honor it,
well,
supposedly, right?
you know how they do. So
Yeah.
right now, I'm just working on. I have all that here on the synod arguments that they try and make, like for instance, this is the history of Muhammad, right? It's not a hadith, it's the history. It's historically what Muhammad did. The earliest scholars, the earliest teachers in Islam, for the first 200 years after Muhammad, almost unanimously affirmed the satanic verses. It wasn't until later on that people started being like, no, no, it didn't happen, no, and then try and cover it up. But for the first 200 years, this was the consensus. And we have, you don't grade the history of Muhammad at the same way you grade hadiths. Otherwise, there would be no history of Muhammad. You can't do that with his history. So this is factual history that all of the people affirmed for the first 200 years after Muhammad. And, they started covering up later on. You even have like resources that go directly back to the followers of the immediate followers of Muhammad. So like you had the people that, like the 12 that followed Muhammad, and then the people who followed them are reporting this. And they all agreed on it as a historical fact. And Al
Wow.
Tabari is very early on. You have like Ibn Kathir trying to make excuses for it, but then you have people like like Jalalain. He affirms it. Ibn Abbas affirms it. Al Tabari affirms it, and then you have other scholars trying to refute it and discredit the isnad and the chains of narrations when really historically for the first 200 years, like I said, it was basically unanimous that this is a historical event. It's a fact.
Yeah, bro. This is crazy.
So if he was such a bad, 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 bad prophet, why did God just not find another prophet? It just goes to show you how ignorant that it's like, yeah, nowhere in history are prophets allowed to do this, but he can.
Yeah. Oh, what were you saying, King? Yeah, go ahead, bro. No, no, they all try and cover it up. Today in modern Islam, it went from 200 years after the Prophet, where everybody affirmed it, to modern day today, where basically if you affirm it, they say you're an unbeliever. Islam has completely transformed. It used to be unanimous for 200 years after Muhammad, to now modern day, scholars will try and tell you that you don't even really believe in Muhammad. You're a kafir if you believe this happened. Well, this is Well, it's really these main two, but we have many, many chains of narration, many different narrations on this same verse. The point is that this one verse, this is what I know, that this one verse here where he says that their intercession is approved with Allah, these three pagan deities, that's the satanic verses. I mean, we know, bro, we know that all of them are satanic because they contradict all of the Bible. We know they're all satanic. But here, according to even Islamic scholars and historians, these verses right here are straight from the devil's mouth. And Muhammad didn't even know. He can't tell if he's sitting next to Satan or if he's sitting next to God.
Yeah, this just basically, you know, nails it. This just is the hammer and nail right here, basically, you would say, right?
Oh yeah, totally, totally. But then you get the clever ones who try and play games, with the isnad. They try and play games with the chains of narration. Like I'll show you. There's probably in here. I'm gonna put the book on the screen here. In this book, he gives probably right. I think it's called. Hold on a second. Let me get it for you. Give me a second.
Everybody share the live and tap the screen. Let's get this moving.
So he gives about 50. So he gives about 50. So he get so in that book he gives about 50 different riwaya, which is like, different narrations with different chains. Like two or three of them are like impeccable. Like impeccable. They go back to the followers of the direct followers of Muhammad. But they're going to try and discredit every single last one of them. Well, guess what? There were a lot of reliable scholars, reliable people at that time for 200 years who said these were the truth. So if you want to throw them out because you want to nitpick at narration, stuff like that, well, people who are better Muslims than you guys, people who sat there and studied it, who were extremely dependable, even according to Islam, said that this stuff is true, that this is a fact, this happened. So what they're going to try and say is, what they're basically saying is, oh no, I don't trust them. That's what they're basically saying. So in that book that I gave you guys first, that's where you're going to see, all of that elaborated on. He goes over it more deeply. You can also find it in the history of Muhammad, the life of Muhammad by Ibn Ishaq. So Ibn Ishaq was like super early on, and he affirmed the satanic verses also as something historical. All they can make a claim is, there's some. If you're going to grade the history of Muhammad like a hadith, oh, you can find some weakness here and there, but the truth is the history of Muhammad can never be graded in the same way as a hadith. Otherwise, what scholars say is you would have no history of Muhammad then.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
And people might say I'm wild for saying this, but if you want to fight evil and you want to fight your enemy, get to know your enemy and know your enemy. You know what I'm saying? Know what you're fighting. Don't go in there blind. You know what I'm saying? And I'm actually trying to take the extra mile to actually read and try to understand Arabic now, so I could actually read what it's really saying in the Quran, the Arabic text, and not the linguistic English text, because you already know they're trying to caveat it. They're not telling you the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, totally, 100%. And here's that other book, guys. If you want to, this goes into depth. And Shehab Ahmed, he's an Islamic scholar, and he wrote an entire book about it. And he gives you all the 50 different resources and goes in depth. And he really explains how that orthodoxy, as far as Islam is concerned, has really perverted what Islam was before.
Oh, like Christian Orthodoxy or just
No, Islamic orthodoxy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Every time I hear the word Orthodoxy, I keep thinking of that. Oh.
All right, guys, I might have missed some comments. I mean, yeah, Islam started with Muhammad. He was the one who claimed to be the next prophet, the final messenger. But we know that he was hearing from a different entity because the revelations he got are explain a different God than all the revelations before. For instance, the revelations in the scriptures for the Gospels in the Old Testament testify of a God who is a father. He has different attributes, different ways about him. How he describes himself is completely different than how he describes himself describes how God describes himself in Islam. So we know that there are two different entities. There's our God in Christianity and Judaism, and then there's the Islamic God, which has made himself separate. He describes himself completely differently, so we know he's a different entity. Here's another thing: the God of the Jews, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the true and living God, says that Christ was going to come and unalive for our sins. The Messiah, his soul would be an atonement for sin. He would be crucified. He'd be raised. Jesus himself even said those things would happen. It was indeed fulfilled in the New Testament. And then Muhammad comes along 700 years later and proves to us that he's listening to a devil in a cave when he says Jesus was never crucified. So God doesn't go on for 4,000 years teaching one thing, and then the very same God teach something exactly opposite 700 years later, right? That's how we know that it's a different entity speaking to Muhammad. Did what? Muhammad didn't come into, I don't know if I understand your question. No, Muhammad didn't. Yeah, so Muhammad came 6 to 700 years after Jesus. So he was hundreds of years later. The Christians at the time, like John of Damascus, called Muhammad a heretic, a Christian heretic. They believed that Islam was just another Christian heresy, just another cult that says they believe in Jesus but has perverted the scriptures and are just in deep, deep heresy where there is no salvation. That's what they believe. So John of Damascus wrote a book about heresies, and in it he details Islam as another Christian heresy. And just to be clear, John of Damascus was around the time of Muhammad.
Absolutely not. They're just they're just told to go to their imams. They're just told to recite the Quran. Nope, nope. They don't know it. They're just told to go to the mosque and pray, and any questions to listen to their imams, and that's it. Don't understand it. Don't read Arabic. Just recite and do what you're told, and pray 5 times a day, and keep the Ramadan fast. That's it.